episode 452 of Global from Asia podcast, how to 9x multiple your Amazon e-commerce business with no other than Steve Selikoff. Let's tune in today.
Welcome to the Global from Asia podcast, where the daunting process of running an international business is broken down into straight up actionable advice. And now, your host, Michael Michelini.
Thank you so much for listening to, or maybe watching, today's podcast at Global from Asia. It's a new year, 2025, and many exciting things happening every year. It seems like a fresh start. More announcements than that coming. But today we have an amazing session with no other than Steve Selikoff, a mentor of mine. He's an expert in the retail game and in Amazon and e-commerce for many years. And we are so lucky to have him. This was a live webinar. Some people really joined us for the live webinar with him, and we had Q&A and connection. So this one is going to be a time for us to get together and listen. He went on for a really in-depth discussion about, profitability, because a lot of us talk about how much revenue, a 6-figure, 7-figure, 8-figure. I remember some of my friends said, you could be like a 10-figure if you sold at a loss or break even maybe, but to be profitable should be your goal. And this is what we talk about in depth in this webinar recording, which is totally epic. With the URL, you can get some of the links at globalfromasia.com/multiple. But let's tune into this show. Do you enjoy the podcast, Global from Asia? Do you enjoy all the community events that we do? The best way to support is coming out to our annual cross-border summit.com in Chiang Mai this November 3rd, 4th, and 5th, 2025. I have amazing speakers, amazing people getting together. We're pushing the limits. We're making things happen. This is where the movers and shakers and the deal makers come. It's a limited supply of attendees and tickets, and we have been selling out every year. So I recommend checking out earlier, crossbordersummit.com.
But let's start off by talking about just what's going on over here with these tariffs. That's the important thing. So right now, with President Trump looking to take office in January, he has been talking about tariffs 60% in some campaign stops, 100%. We'll talk 60% today. Tariffs against China. Also, 25% tariffs against Mexico, 25% tariffs against Canada, and a blanket 20% tariffs against every other country in the world. Whether this is going to happen or if it's just posturing, who knows? I hope that doesn't happen. But like the old saying, you hope for the best and you prepare for the worst, which is why when we do our Canton Fair trips, we have in the past always talked about getting a 7x multiplier, and now we're just bumping that up to a 9x multiplier. It's not difficult. It's not impossible. And I hear that all the time. You can't get a 9x multiplier. You can't get a 7x multiplier. You absolutely can. But before we go into just the tariffs, this helps because of other problems that are coming up as well. There was a dock strike that was going to happen in the east coast of the U.S., and they put that on hold until January. And while it was on hold, they came to an agreement of 62% salary increase, which is really nice, but they held off on decision of automation. The dock workers want to have a promise, a guarantee that there's never going to be automation. At the same time, Trump is trying very much to get the U.S. into a manufacturing mode. So if you've ever been to Guangzhou, we've gone to the port there now, since it opened after COVID, we go to the port itself, and it's the 6th largest in the world. 4 of the others are also in China. They all depend on automation. You can't get that big and you can't be that effective for shipping without automation. So you've got the workers saying, we demand that you never do automation. And Trump saying we want to be able to increase our manufacturing. So they need to do automation. Hopefully, again, that gets figured out. Just in case, if there is a strike over automation, we can expect higher shipping rates and more congestion. So once again, a high multiplier is really important. There's a DDP crackdown. And the DDP crackdown is, we saw it during Trump's first administration. He very quickly changed the penalties for undervaluation, undercount, and misrepresentation of country of origin from being a fine to being a fine plus prison time, up to 1 year for your first infringement, first violation, 2 years on your second violation, 100,000 on your first violation, 250,000 on your second violation. It's huge. He knows about DDP. He knows about these shady freight forwarders who are doing undercounts and so on. So if people are using shady freight forwarders, you're going to risk a much higher risk. And then finally, we've got TikTok Shop. We've got Temu. We've got Shein. Two things are happening there. Number one, they use something called the Section 321 or de minimis rule as a loophole. People know, oh yeah, if you import something to U.S. that's under $800, you can get it in without paying tariffs. That's not going to stay around, and we'll talk about that in a little bit on one of the slides. But what that means is, because they have very low prices on these platforms, and because they have this de minimis rule, people who are price sensitive are going to start looking at platforms other than Amazon. So you can already see people going on to Temu, going on to Shein, and so on. But there's going to be more than those. And I've been at the meetings, and Michael and I have chatted about that. So there are some big players coming on board to sell directly from factories to U.S. consumers. And all this is going to happen within the next year. So if you're running on tight margins and your customers are price sensitive, they will leave Amazon and look on other platforms, in order to save money. So you have to have low prices. It's critical these days. So, by the way, if anyone has questions as we go along, just shout them out or
Yeah, I can help relay questions. That's the benefit of guys being here. So just please don't be shy.
Good. So if you're going to edit this and post it at this point, put in the first video.
Okay.
But I'll ask anyone who's with us right now who has the list of videos. If you click on that first one, you should have someone that says hello.
Sadiq, right? Sadiq.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
So if you watch through that video, and it's rather short, you'll see him talk about a few things that happen. This video takes place at the Canton Fair. The people who join us actually shadow us. We do negotiation for real. We randomly choose different suppliers. We go in there. In this case, they did stuffed animals, plushies, stuffies, whatever you call it, where you are. We took a rather large-sized stuffed animal, and we quickly figured out that retail price could be $20 on this. Not bad at all. With charm pricing, that would be $19.95. And she started off giving us a price of $4. $4 is nice. That's a 5x multiplier. 20 divided by 4, 5x multiplier, which a lot of people would be very happy with. We wanted more. So a few things happen. First of all, right away, she recognizes that I'm a boss. And that sounds small, but it is super, super important. Second is when she comes with $4, I just dismiss it and I keep on going. One of the things that a lot of people are frightened of is saying no when you're negotiating with a Chinese supplier. Never be afraid of that. And then she continued, and she almost pretended like that never happened. And she came back with another opening order. It's like you're playing a game of chess. She knocked all the pieces off the board, set them up, and say, oops, we didn't see that. And now she came back with $3.30, which is a 6x multiplier, and started talking quantities. So what I did when she starts talking quantities is I changed the topic, and we'll talk about that in a moment. I gave her something else to talk about. And then after talking with my own team there, knowing that she's listening in, I come back and I give her a price of $2.14 a unit. And we don't have an answer. And again, that's okay. When we'll talk about this in more detail. Don't be afraid of walking away if you don't have a solid answer. It's China. That's okay. Which we did. 20 minutes later, she texted us back and said, yes, $2.14 is all right. And that's a 9.3x multiplier. So hopefully you guys had a chance to watch that on the screen. And we're going to go through this bit by bit. The first thing is, with no tariffs at all, no tariffs, imagine zero just getting into the port, it would have been at $4 a unit. With tariffs, $6.40. But even with the tariffs and our negotiation, it would have come into the port at $3.42 a unit. So we would bring it in with tariffs, less than somebody who had no tariffs. So it's super important. You're in competition. You want to make more money than your competitors. What did you see in there? I was there in person. I gave a lot of nonverbal clues about my experience and my role. I let them know that I am the boss and they need to talk up to the boss. I did not talk about Amazon. I did build their confidence and their awareness of our value by discussing our business plan. Never, 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 never act like it's your first time. And for women, and we'll talk about this a little bit as well, if you have a black blazer, wear a black blazer, and we'll talk about why that works. But that's actually really important. So we're going to hold off the next two videos for a moment and go right into this. All right. Every product costs the same in China, in Thailand, Canada, Germany, Australia. Every product costs the same things: time, labor, and materials. That's the base level. On top of that is operations, keeping the doors open, the lights on, and GA, that's people's salaries. And then on top of that is whatever they can add on to make profit, and that's price times quantity. This is interesting because in the last year and a half, I see a lot of factories adding a new reason why they need to charge more. They're saying, oh, we paid so much for R&D and developing this and so on. No. Their engineers don't sit around waiting for you to walk into the door and then they'll get paid. They get paid every week or every 2 weeks or every month, no matter whether you walked in the door or not. So your product has nothing to do with them being paid. It's part of GA. That's people's salaries. There are only two things that you can impact bringing down the price. Only two things. One is that top layer, the profit. That's based on their impression and the value that you bring to them. If they think the only value you bring is being an open wallet, then they're going to take as much money as they can from you. And the bottom layer, which is time, labor, materials. And I think a lot of people who've done this for a while has experienced this. You make some changes to what those materials are or how it's engineered. If you can save time, if you can save labor, if you can save materials, then you're bringing the cost down. So if you're doing a backpack or a knapsack and it's got YKK zippers, if you can use other zippers other than YKK, they're famously expensive, you're going to bring the price down. So all you can impact is the time, labor, and materials, and that top layer, the profit or the value that you bring to them. And that's what we're going to be talking about now. What value do you bring to the relationship? Well, in that video, you saw me talking. Immediately, she knew I was a boss. In China, kings negotiate with kings. You are a king. If you start off saying, I'm just a purchasing manager or something like that, it's not going to work for you. because you are not at the level to make good, important business decisions. And they want to invest in your business, not in your job. So saying, oh, I'm a purchasing manager or my boss is going to fire me, that's all about your job. They don't care. What's important is your business and what value you bring. So they're not going to worry about bringing the price down for you. But that's also self-respect. If this is your business, own it. Be the king. They respect that. China is a Confucian culture, and that means social roles are very, very important. If you are in China and you walk down a hallway with the owner of the factory, if they're being gracious, they'll let you go first. It's not like Western cultures where you're holding the door open and letting them go first. It's a recognition that you are the boss. If you go into an elevator with the boss of a factory, you'll notice that everyone else stands to the side and some often look down. The boss is front and center. He walks through that elevator first, walks through a door first. That's China. And it's the same thing for you. So little things immediately establish that you're a boss. I'm not sure if anyone's had a chance to have lunch or dinner in China, but they have those big round tables. There's a place where the boss sits at those big round tables, and they actually sit opposite the door, like the old Westerns in the movies. But all those things establish that you're a boss. So right away, I did things in that video that let her know I was a boss. And the easiest and the simplest trick to establish that you're a boss and it's a serious business is to bring along a friend. Have them pretend to be your staff. And if you actually have staff, bring along your real staff. They're going to be silent. They're only going to talk when you talk to them. Just like children in America, they're supposed to be seen and not heard. Your staff is there to be seen and not heard unless you ask them a question. But again, it very quickly establishes you as a boss. In China, the goal of a negotiation is a relationship. That relationship is super powerful. But there's more to that, because a relationship on its own is not going to guarantee you the best prices. That's how you want to build guanxi. And guanxi is not just a business relationship. It's a mutually beneficial business relationship, so that each of you brings value to the other. And if you establish a mutually beneficial business relationship, then you can bring the price down. So again, how do you establish that you bring benefit? Well, if you're a lowly purchasing manager, you have no say over the company or what it does or anything else. If you're the boss, you can control the company, what the company is doing, and so on. So we talked there with that woman about what our plans are. And our plans were, in 2 years' time, to be shipping 3 containers a quarter. How did we come up with that? Number one, if you look at MOQ, either in a discussion at the Canton Fair on Alibaba, Made in China, or anything else, they're always going to talk in units. How many units are you going to order? Get that off the table. Forget about talking about units. As long as if your product's tiny like this thing, it's going to be a little more difficult. But as long as your product's moderately sized, figure out how many containers it fills. And here's a trick. This is more common when I was growing up, but what a bread box is. It's usually a wooden container that holds a nicely fresh baked loaf of bread in your kitchen. Bread box is about this big. And if you can visualize a bread box, you can decide if your product's bigger or smaller than a bread box. People used to play a game called 20 Questions. And one of the questions was traditionally, is it bigger than a bread box? Here's the wonderful trick. A 40-foot container holds 10,000 bread boxes. So if your product is bigger than a bread box, maybe it's 1.5 times the size of a bread box, then your container is going to hold 6,000 units. If it's half the size of a bread box, a 40-foot container holds 20,000 units. So once you have that idea in mind, you can turn around and say, well, our goal is going to be in 2 years, we're going to be shipping 10,000 units every month, or you can say 3 containers every quarter. Now you're talking in a different number. That salesperson, even the boss, and you should be talking to the boss, but oftentimes they don't speak English. They'll sit there and listen. Now you're talking containers. They know that you bring value. Just because if they can sell a container at a time rather than a unit at a time, that's better. It's the exact same numbers, but you're making it sound better. And let's say you don't think you can get 1 container a quarter. Well, then maybe you can get half of that. So maybe this particular stuffy, which we'll go into in a moment, we can only sell 5,000 every quarter. 5,000, well, that's half of 10,000, but a 20-foot container is half of a 40-foot container. So if we just say container and leave it vague like that, we're still saying the same thing. All of this comes into the nuance and subtlety of what you're saying. And if you notice, as I said, we talked about where we're going to be in 2 years. If I were to ask you, what is your business plan and where will you be in 2 years? Most people will say, my business plan is to start off selling here, and then we're going to scale it like this, and then we're going to go there and there, and maybe we go international and get it bigger. And by the end of the first year, we should be doing this. End of the second year, we should be going up there. I did the exact reverse. She wanted to get an understanding of how much we're going to be creating, how much we're going to be buying, And I said, in 2 years' time, we expect to be at 3 containers a quarter. I didn't talk to her about how we get from here to there. Everyone knows that you have to crawl, walk, run. I'm letting her know where we're going to be. Same answer, but I don't give her all of the non-important stuff between now and then. I go right into where we're going to be in 2 years. Then we'll get to that point of smaller orders. And that 2-year number is going to be there when we negotiate price and everything else. And I'll talk to you how you bring that down in a few minutes. So now she sees that we bring financial value to them. Now we're getting a big step towards Guanxi because we're helping them make money. But there's other ways you can bring value as well. If you don't have the quantities to do that, you've got to think, what else can you bring to the table? It's not selling on Amazon. It was in 2014 and 2015. Amazon removed the prohibition against Chinese nationals selling. And with that prohibition removed, now 60 some odd % of sellers on Amazon are Chinese. Every single factory, every single trading company, assembly company you go into, all have some sort of white background photo set up. Even if they're not saying they're selling on Amazon, they are. I mean, that's why it's there. And there's a lot of Westerners now who have returned to China, helping them sell on Amazon. Carbon 6 was there in October, teaching these Chinese sellers all of the tricks that they teach us as well about selling on Amazon. So if you say to them, hey, I bring a lot of value because I sell on Amazon, they don't care. They're selling on Amazon as well. What else can you bring that brings value? Well, there's a few things. Let's say that Michael and I were both doing plastic toys. So I have 2 different plastic toys here. One's a little giraffe and one's a little shark.
Cool. Nice.
Okay. Now, this little shark is done with a solar cell. There's a little bit of electronics in it and so on. That's one toy. This little giraffe's another toy.
Nice.
Now, here's the cool thing. If I'm making the little giraffes and I tell them I need whatever it is, 10,000 giraffes, the value that I bring is that price per unit times 10,000. But I say, hey, I've got a friend, Michael, and he's making plastic units. I know he's not making the same one as me. We are not in competition, and we're friends. We know what each one of us is doing. I say, I've got a friend who's doing little sharks with little solar cells, and they dance when the light's on them. So this plastic making factory says, hey, we can make those too. I say, great, let me make an introduction. Michael talks to them, he likes them, and he places his order for 10,000 units. Suddenly, the value that I bring is not my 10,000 units. It is Well, it's more than 20,000. You would think I bring to the table my 10,000 and I'm responsible for Michael's 10,000. So now I'm more valuable to them. But it's more than that. Does Stephen have other friends? Are there other people he might bring to the table? So in their mind, my value is me, 10,000, Michael, 10,000. And if they do a good job, who else is next? Because I've proven that I'll bring other value, other work to them. I'm suddenly now very valuable. What about Michael? He's the same. He gets the benefit the same way. My 10,000, his 10,000, and maybe he has friends that he can bring to the table. So now both of us have increased our value. If they're going to mess up with quality on mine, they're going to lose him too. And if they mess up with quality on his or miss deadlines, they're going to lose me. So now there's more pressure on them to bring that price down because they want to make us happy. That's one simple way to bring value. If you are in the United States or Canada, Australia, UK, to a lesser degree, and let's say that you've got a company that makes little giraffes, or even better, little, what is this thing here?
Yeah.
It's a little character. Like
yeah.
a figure.
Anime or something.
Yeah. So let's say that's what I have making. I'm having them make that for me. And they're doing great. But if I go to the store and I find other versions, let's go back to the shark. If I find other versions of the shark, what's trending right now in Walmart and Target and so on. Oh, sharks are big, but so are little pandas. They don't know about that. I don't make pandas. I don't care if they make pandas. So what do? I take out my phone. I take photos of all the other little solar toys they have. And then I send them an email. I say, hey, or it could be on WeChat. I was in the store and I thought you might be interested in this because it kind of looks like the things you would be making. And I send them the pictures. Whoa, they love that because they can't walk in those stores themselves without going to the United States. Now you have just shared with them what their competitors don't know. You've shared with them what is popular in the United States. And now they can start doing that in their planning. I don't care if they copy some product that I'm not doing, has nothing to do with me. If their machinery can make it, if their equipment, if their workers can make it, and they can make some money, great. I've provided something they don't have, eyes and ears in those stores in the United States. Even if you're working with the lowest salesperson in the whole company, the moment you send photos like this, I guarantee they are going to the owner of the company, and now they know your name. You're bringing up the value. The more value you bring, the more you build guanxi, which is a business relationship based on the benefits each of you can bring to the other. So I've been talking about this for a while. I've probably talked over some slides. So let's go into this. She said 500. I dismissed it right away. I wanted to let her know I'm not a small quantity purchaser. Notice I did not say Amazon because selling on Amazon just does not have any value to them anymore. Now, in my case, I also sell to retailers. So I casually mentioned, where are we going to be in 2 years? Well, we're going to be selling to retailers, and we expect to be doing 3 containers a quarter. She can sell on Amazon, but she cannot sell to U.S. retailers. 1, they don't have that access. 2, culturally, they don't like the way that retailers work because they'll hold payment 60, 90 days. And a lot of retailers, particularly these days, are very cautious about dealing with anyone. There's a xenophobic trend in the United States. If you're speaking with a Chinese accent, they feel awkward about working with you. In fact, Walmart is telling all of their suppliers to start finding some supply chains outside of China.
Wow.
Just to be sure that if the prices go down or whatever. So I mentioned retailers. They can't do that. And then there's trade-offs. I started talking about different types of fabric. They had a flannel fleece, which is a little bit shorter than a polar fleece. On the belly of some of theirs, they had that very soft minky. I know what these fabrics are. I've done fabrics before. So I understood, and I started talking to her about that. And if we change this fabric or that fabric or the length of the tail, now we're talking time, labor, and materials. So there's only two things you can impact: time, labor, and materials, and that profit level. That profit level is impacted by the amount of value we bring to them and the time, labor, materials. I'm making trade-offs so it can be less. That's all it took. She took me seriously because I had a serious business plan. I wasn't just walking in saying, I want this, and walking out. I took the time to talk, and I took the time to share information with her. So if you go back and watch that same video again, and feel free to at the end of this, you'll see, why am I the boss? Because I'm confident. Look at my posture. I'm sitting there, my hands back and everything else.
Right.
There is a really interesting aspect to negotiating with Chinese suppliers. They're patient. They expect that we are impatient. And you'll see it all the time. And I have friends who are some of the biggest gurus in the Amazon space. And sometimes I've actually helped them out and I've taken over negotiations for them. Other times I've been with them as they negotiate. And almost everyone has the same failing as a Westerner: impatience. Use that to your advantage. If they give you a price, pick up your phone, start working on the calculator and figure it out. Look at them. Go back to the calculator. Be serious and just be silent the whole time. Nature abhors a vacuum. If they're silent to you, you'll talk. But if you're silent to them and it looks like you're calculating things, you're not making thoughtful decisions, they will start bringing down the price on their own. And it happens again and again. So now they say that you have value. They see that you're successful. They want to work with you. And it's silence. Wait, they might lose you. What's happening? They start talking. And this happens consistently. I'm just being silent. And a quick reminder, kings negotiate with kings. So when you start, you need to know your target price. So in this case, we knew that we were going to be at $19.99. So a 10x would have been $20 over $2 would have been 10x. Is that correct? I think I got that wrong. But anyway, start off with where you want to end up. I took a trip across the United States. It was great. I went from the East Coast to the West Coast, and I stopped at Yosemite, which is not Yosemite, Yellowstone, which is an incredible national park. And outside the park, these big rest areas and a big map. And someone had written, if you don't know where you're going, how do you've arrived? If you don't know your target price, how do you negotiate it effectively? Negotiation is not something that comes from the gut. It's something that does not come from the ego. It comes from financial calculations. So if you feel, how much should I be bringing the price down? 20% is the right amount to be bringing prices down. No. 10%, no. 50%, no. You don't know what that percentage is. You do know what your target is. And if you get to your target, then you're successful. And maybe it's really easy, like in this case. So what? You're at your target, you're making money. And with a 9x multiplier, you're making money because most Amazon sellers are at 3x or 4x. You're making money, great. If they're making money, even better. And you can say that to them. You can let them know, I want to make money. I want you to make money. Don't be frightened about them making money. Tell them, you have kids. I want you taking them to Shanghai Disney every weekend. It's okay for them to make money. As long as I'm at my target or less, I'm making money. There's no egos involved. Now, once that number, never start with it. Always start below and then slowly come up. Be patient, remember. And then the cardinal rule of any negotiation: never give without getting. Oh, we can't go below $3 a unit. No, that would have been just over a 6x multiplier. Not where I wanted to be. But I said, okay, if we do that, I need 60 days payment terms. Never give without getting. And if you're stuck, we just talked about the YKK zippers. We can talk about the little shark here. If you're stuck and they're saying the price is X, then ask them why. If you have a 4-year-old child in your home, or you've ever had a 4-year-old, learn from them. They're going to ask you why. Same thing. Dig down. Why is this? Well, it turns out that this particular solar cell is more expensive than other solar cells. Okay, let's get a cheaper solar cell. As long as the little shark dances, we don't care. So you've got to get down to the component level of find out why. And now here's a wonderful little trick. It's purely psychological. If they say, oh, the price is $6, $7 a unit, you can say, I can't do that. I need to get, and you calculator. Yeah, I need to be between $4.11 and $4.53. They're immediately going to go to the upper level of your upper end of your range. They're thinking, okay, if they could get to $4.53, they win, because I didn't get them down to $4.11. It's purely psychological. Every one of you, every single one of you, if you've ever done negotiation, and I ask you, I'm negotiating with you, I'm saying, what's the lower end that what's the lowest you could possibly go? You're going to tell me 0, give it to me for free. There is no lower constraint. So why am I saying I have to be above $4.11? It doesn't make sense, but it works, because they'll immediately glom onto the $4.53 in this example, and they think they're happy. You've just given without getting anything. That you've given to them, and they haven't gotten anything. One more time. You get the low price without giving up anything. And it just works all the time. And then don't be afraid to walk away. And this is really interesting, because it's not the way things are done in Western negotiation. Chinese culture, you don't have to come to a conclusion for negotiation. The US is very process driven. It's almost a conflict. It's confrontational. I've got to get this price, they've got to get that price, and it becomes a winner and everything else. So that's not the way it is in China. Negotiation builds the relationship. So in this particular case, she was at a price. She wasn't sure if she could do it or not, but now she knows who we are. We know who she is, and we leave it at that. We say, thank you very much. 20 minutes later, we get a text on WeChat saying, yes, we can do that. And by the way, I also asked for terms. When you go back and watch that video, you'll see where I messed up. I said, I need 3x. Oops, I need 3x. This is the way you say 3 in China. And little things like this let her know that I understood what I'm doing and saying. If you've ever seen the movie Inglourious Bastards with Brad Pitt, there's a scene where they give themselves away. They're pretending to be German and they're not. And the guy gives himself away by ordering 3 beers or 2 beers like this, not the German way. And the bad guy immediately realized it. So little things like that. But do not be afraid of walking away. Walk away if it's not a good deal. Always. Don't fall in love with your concept and lose money. If you're not making money, if you don't have the right deal, walk away. But also, if it does look good and you haven't reached a definite conclusion, it's still okay to walk away. This is positive. Walk away and follow up another time, or let them follow up, which is what happened in this case. It's different than Western negotiation. There we go. So what do you never do? Anyone who sells on Amazon knows that Amazon's complex. PPC, even just listing your product is complex. If you can figure out Amazon, then you can figure out shipping. There's only 11 Incoterms. Those are the different types of shipping styles, DDP is an Incoterm. You really only need to know about 3 of them, maybe 4 of them. And that is XWorks, EXW, FOB, DDP, so what you're giving up on. And the last one would be DDU, only to know that it doesn't exist. It was taken off the list of approved Incoterms in 2010. I was started selling on Amazon in 2005. I don't know many people out in the world these days who were selling on Amazon or importing goods in 2010. But if you remember, DDU was being abused all over the place, just like DDP is now. And the International Chamber of Commerce took it off the list of approved Incoterms. So those that are out there saying DDU, they're still looking to abuse it. They're just assuming you're not smart enough to actually go out there and learn about the Incoterms, but you are smart enough. It's not complicated. If you can learn Amazon, you can learn Incoterms. So why do I say that? I can go into any conference of Amazon sellers, and if I put together 100 sellers and I had them raise their hands, how long it takes to go through U.S. Customs. Say if anyone who says it takes 5 days or more, anyone who's had to deal with a week or more, 10 days. How many people have had to deal with 2 weeks to get through U.S. Customs? And there's always going to be people who have horror stories. It took me 30 days to go through U.S. Customs. The reality takes to go through U.S. Customs. It's done online. This is 2024. This is not Christopher Columbus going across the ocean blue. This is not factories saying, yes, we've set it out, and you'll know it arrives when UPS, this is your tracking number, and you'll know it's there. None of that. They know where every ship is. They track every ship. They put in Form 7501, which is customs, on a computer, not even from the boat. It's done from a customs broker's office. It doesn't take 5 days. It takes 60 seconds, maybe a little longer if you type slowly like me. That's as long as it takes. And it's done 5 days before the container reaches port. It gets into the port, it pulls up, those cranes immediately start taking stuff off. They get put into the yard. China, it's got more constraints than the U.S. In the U.S., it can, at least on the West Coast, it can sit in the yard for up to 4 days. But they've got to keep cargo moving. So it gets quickly off the yard. In fact, in China, we mentioned earlier automation. In Guangzhou, Nansha, they have 4 different sections of the port. One of them is fully automated. They go on robotic trucks, like bases that roll the containers around, put them where they need to be. It's quick. So why is it taking 5 days, 10 days, 20 days to go through customs? The reality is your stuff is not on the container that you paid for. DDP, unlike every other Incoterm, you are not the owner of your products. You're not. They fill out all the forms. They fill out customs. The way that they can do that is legally, they own your product. Back when I started, if you shipped DDP, you never paid them until it arrived at the final destination, because that's the way DDP, you didn't own it till it arrived at the final destination. After Mike and these other guys who did, not you, Mike, or the Mike McClary, the guys who wrote Amazing Selling Machine, the very first course, they didn't know what they were doing. They asked for DDP. They tell everyone else, take DDP because it's easy. So now all these shady freight forwarders are doing DDP. And the reason that it costs so little is because they're putting it on the cheapest, slowest boat that they can. Even if you're paying for fast boats, they're not. They're going on slow boats. There's some services that give you super Matson service. So you're paying for super Matson. Guess what? Matson's a very small line. They only have 2 boats that go back and forth to China. And since it takes each one of them about 25 to 30 days, because they're slower, to go from one country to the other and then back again, you're only going to see that boat in port 6 or 7 times a year, and the other one. So you're total of 14 times out of the year you have a chance of being on a Matson boat, and it's slow anyway. And they don't go to all the ports in China. They go to Shanghai. Why are you paying Super Matson? It's a nothing. It's just a made-up service. And I used to complain about this on Facebook all the time. And finally, the managers at what they're called, Forest Leopard, who started this, now a bunch of them do it. They got a hold of me. And they said, why are you yelling about this all the time? I said, because it's wrong. And they said, what, everyone's mother? No, they didn't say it like that. They said it through translations, but it's the same thing. And I thought about it, and I said, you're right. I'm not responsible for making sure everyone else is informed about stuff they didn't even bother studying or learning or going online and finding out. Yeah, so I'll hold back. Unless there's something really bad, I'm not going to say anything. And we agreed, and that's how we left it. And that's nice. And because it's China, as in China, they give a gift. So they sent me a gift as a thank you. It was very nice. It was a thermos that has the temperature gauge on top so you could keep your tea hot and everything else. And because they suck as a freight forwarder, it took 3.5 months for their gift to get to me.
Jeez, that's
insane. But crazy. I have been told, funny enough, in April of 2022, when China opened up again, and I was there at the Canton Fair, a lot of folks, the young men and women from Forest Leopard who are online pretending to be experts, they came up to me at the Canton Fair. Oh, we want to get pictures with you. Yeah. And supposedly my face is all over the place at Forest Leopard and even some of their promotional things, which is pretty funny. Don't ask for DDP. That's like saying that going to a motorcycle rally and having training wheels on your bicycle. It's not hard to learn about FOB or X-Works. Guess what? It's the tariffs and everything else we've been talking about. They're based on how much you pay your commercial invoice. DDP, they don't even ask you for a commercial invoice. That's where DDP is being hit hard. That's why Trump in his first term added to the penalties. They know what's going on. And I'm not sure if I showed this to you, Michael, or not. I have a video. I had someone come to my class, work with Customs and Border Protection, chief of the police. So they're working with customers and border protection, hand in hand with Homeland Security, until he moved on to the special division just for targeting people who are making infractions. Customs has an incredible database and an algorithm. They know who is messing up, who's trying to screw things around, who's putting in things without counting them, undervaluing them, and so on. They know who they are. And if Trump wants to crack down on them, they will.
Got it.
They know who they are. So be very cautious when you ask for DDP. If you say to your factory, I want to do DDP, then they're not going to think you're professional. They're not going to think you're able to bring benefits because you're still using training wheels on your bicycle and you don't even know what you're doing. Another thing you never do is make them lose face. China is a country of respect. Gosh, I've had some really terrible people I've dealt with in China, real crooks. And when it gets too much for me, my attorney is excellent at taking over for me and still allowing them to keep face. But you allow them to keep face. Something hasn't arrived and you asked for it 2 months ago and they still haven't sent it. You don't say, oh, you idiot, you haven't sent it yet. What are you doing? You're just leading me on. No. You say, the messenger service must have messed up because it hasn't arrived yet. Can you work that out with them and have it resent again? Don't say to them they're an idiot, even if they are an idiot. Remember when I said you're not bringing any value by saying you sell on Amazon. So if you ask for FinSKU on every one of your products, you're telling them all we do is sell on Amazon. When you're sitting there at the beginning and you're negotiating a price, or you've just gone through their factory, you're negotiating a price, that's not when you talk about the FinSKU. That comes to the end when you start talking about your packaging. That's the only place it gets printed. So it's not in the conversation yet. Don't tell them about the FinSKU. And I know some people call it an FNSKU. As I say, I've been with this for a long, long time. I worked at Microsoft for 14 years. A lot of my friends, we go back and forth in Seattle. Amazon, Microsoft, Google, everyone works for everyone. It's a crazy, strange network. It is FinSkew. And by the way, it's also SKU, not SKU. If you deal with a Chinese factory, they're going to say SKU, but that's just the way they say it. When you deal with retailers or professionals in the US, Western world, say the word SKU. It's not SKU. And if you want an example, I love the advertisements for iPhone when it first came out. There's an app for that. Everything that you load onto your phone, you call an app. But guess what they call it in China? An APP.
Yeah.
If you tell your friends, oh, look at this great APP I found. I can shoot up little unicorns or something. What is an APP? It's an app. What is an SKU? It's a SKU. Don't start off talking about small orders. Talk about where you're going to be in 2 years. Now, this is fantastic. Pay attention to this one. You negotiate for that 2,000 unit price. That's the price you negotiate for. Then, okay, we're ready for our first order. You want 2,000? No, something. Things are going crazy right now. Inflation's, tariffs. It's going to be crazy to start off at 2,000. Let's start off with 500. No. The price is for 2,000. Okay. What's the surcharge? Because I know it's not 2,000. Tell me the surcharge for a small order, and we can do that. Now that changes the conversation. They're not increasing the price because it's a small order. They're adding a surcharge. So now they say instead of being $6.22, it's got to be $9.22. That's a hell of a surcharge. Well, just for this example. So they're adding $3 on a unit for that first 500. So your response then is, okay, but I want to have that surcharge applied to my next order as a credit. So now they're not losing money. If you disappear after this, they've made their $9 a unit. But if you're doing well and you make that next order, that extra money you just paid, that $1,500 or whatever that is, gets taken off of, it's credited. So at the end of the day, you're at the original price for everything. It works out and your accountant's going to pat you on the head and say, good boy, you figured it out. Ask for a surcharge. That's how you get into small orders. Just like asking for DDP, don't pay for samples. You can pay for the shipping. Don't pay for samples. Why? A sample shows you the quality of their work. My dad used to say, never buy a car that's made on a Friday afternoon or a Monday morning because the quality coming off the assembly line is going to be bad. They're hungover on Monday. They're rushing to get out of there on Friday. It's just a saying, but it's a good saying to think about because you want to see the cars that come off on a Tuesday afternoon. You want to see your product that comes off on a Tuesday afternoon. So let's say that you are making these things. It's made of resin. And they make these things. Can they make these bigger ones? Yes. But the sample is to see what quality of work comes out. So you want a sample of something they already make that's similar to your product. You want to look at it. Is the painting done? And the painting's done very, very well. Let's get this up to the camera here. You can see it now. The colors, the form, it's flat on the bottom. So I know the quality of the work. That's why you want samples. There's a misnomer, golden sample. Golden sample. If you make pancakes, particularly if you make pancakes for your kids, the first few are going to be terrible. Takes a few pancakes till they start coming out perfect. It's the same thing, particularly when you have something that's made in the mold, like plastic injection or resin or something like that, memory foam, all these things. Let them do a few of them until they get it right, until they get that perfect pancake. That is the one that all of production is going to follow. That's a golden sample. So what about this? Oh, I want them to make this Bluetooth speaker for the bookshelf that exactly the way I want it. It makes it look like an antique book, but it's really a speaker. Okay.
Steven's frozen, I think. All right. Hopefully we'll be back in a second. If we could collect some questions for him, we're also going to try to have networking. I know this is a little bit later than anticipated with a slower start, and hopefully he gets back here. I'll send him a message.
Mike, can you relate to his scenarios? I think you've dealt with a lot of the manufacturers there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, okay. I could share some of my experiences. But similar to what he says, asking for like 2,000 and ordering 500, you can do, it's kind of called like a blanket purchase order. So you can say maybe how much you're going to order a year, and then you can do a smaller order is another tactic. Sometimes they just want to plan for the year. So it is New Year's now and Chinese New Year. Also keep in mind Chinese New Year is coming. If you didn't place your orders yet, it might almost be too late. Chinese New Year is the end of January. But there, of course, it's year end for us. It's year end for China too. And so, but you don't just place one order. Think about how much you're going to order for a year. Or, oh, he lost power, Sally said. Jeez. Okay. Maybe, but the car dealer one was funny. Ali also says his dealer stopped responding when we asked him what day the car was made. But maybe we can't get Steven back. I thought it was just a temporary one. But the power from a storm in Seattle. Hope he's all right. But I think he was almost wrapping up. It looked like the final points. But the last point I want to talk about, it was on his slide, is never think you're not worthy, right? A lot of times we think we're a new seller, or we're small or young or not as experienced. One thing we have to realize is they want to invest in us. Even if we are a new seller, we all start somewhere, right? So the point that one of his last points was, oh, he's back. Okay, great. We're just sharing that last point about you are worthy. But we should start to wrap up anyway, Steven. But are you able to get back up on stage? Let me make sure I can. You should be able to pop up back again, Steven. But we're talking about the worthy part and some of...
Mike, I have a question.
Yeah, please.
While waiting for Steven to come back. I mean, when you monitor the news, they're showing that some factories are closing left and right. So, like normally, what would you do? Let's say if you like when you order, of course you pay partial, and then how do you make sure that the factory that you outsource the work to will not just suddenly close shop?
I think that's a tricky question. I mean, I don't think there's a straight answer, but luckily, Steven and I, and a lot of people in our community, we go to China and visit the factory and know the factory. Maybe not in the first order, but I've met all the factories I buy from, and so I build somewhat of a relationship with them. And when I try to visit them when I can, I don't visit them every year, but I keep an active relationship with them. But it does make me somewhat worried. But usually there's only a 30-day gap between the deposit and usually the production time is about a month, maybe 2 max. 60 days is a max. So you don't have that much of a risk usually if they take your order, unless they really mean to do bad by you. But also the legal system in China has getting better, although most of us are not ordering enough to make it worth a lawsuit in China or anywhere really. But I think my answer is hopefully you've gotten to know your factory over time, built a relationship, met them, and the lead time should be 30 days to 60 days max. And that's a risk you have to take. And then Ali's got some good points. If they're a big factory, they're less likely to close, and they get subsidies from the government. I'm just reading Ali Gray's answer here. And also you can look at their trade volume on Alibaba, he says. Although I have to say, Ali, I don't know about you, but I order from pretty small factories. I went in this past October and I visited one in Dongguan, and there was no production happening. And it looked like it was a little bit quiet, and it was a little bit concerning. I think I had lunch with her, and she's even telling me she's losing business to other parts of inner China. She's in the south. So, but I still trust her, and I still want to order from her. Maybe her price is a little bit higher than inner China. But that's a good point. You can check if they're a big factory. Although I think a lot of us are ordering from smaller factories out. Maybe your business. Sometimes the big factories don't want to work with smaller sellers, in my experience. And I get more attention from a smaller factory. So it is higher risk. I guess we should all just keep that in mind. That is a higher risk. Okay, Steven's back.
I am back. I don't.
Yeah, I know. Make myself bigger. Well, Steven, maybe we start to wrap up. And it's been a bit longer, I think, than
Yeah,
I was
this has
expecting.
gone for a while, so let's get into questions. I was going to say a couple of other things.
I mean, you are worthy. I think that was your last point. I don't before
Yeah.
even get to.
The two things that I want to say always. One, always communicate on WeChat. That is the most ubiquitous platform in China. They expect you to do that. If you're not, they're going to question your professionalism. And always ask for terms. It's easiest to ask for terms at the very beginning. And people are often frightened of that. Don't be. Ask for terms. Just like I did in that video. And we got the terms as well. Very easy. Now, I sent you the link to two other videos. Those videos, both of them start off because they didn't think we could get 7x, and now I'm looking for 9x. But the second video is a woman named Kim. And as she says in that video, the owner of the factory said there's still room for negotiation. So they went back to the factory. Kim ended up with a 12x multiplier in 40-day terms, 0 down, because she felt comfortable enough to ask them. She was confident. She didn't come from, oh, I'm a sourcing manager. My boss is going to fire me. Please, please, please. No, she's the owner. She's our partner. And she said, this is what we need. She got 12x. You guys can do it. Just go in there knowing that the more you bring value and the more that what you're talking about, you can bring down the time, labor, materials. You can bring down how much they want to charge you. And that's how it works. It's not impossible. The connection I'm on, by the way, is through my phone because
your hotspot or something.
Yeah,
I think we're at the hour and a half since I know.
So with all of that, let me ask if there's questions here.
Well, there was a question. I mean, I was answering best I could. Ali also gave some great insights on the chat, but Jeanette asked, there's factories closing now. The economy seems like not as strong as some. Well, how do you mitigate the risk of your factory like closing even during?
First of all, that's great. I love that. I like the question as well. But yeah, the economy is struggling in China, and they're doing a few things. So be aware of that. What's happened is their domestic demand has decreased, and because their domestic brand demand has decreased, the manufacturing sector has been hit hard. And don't forget, their population is much larger than the U.S. Even though the U.S. is the largest consumer in the world, China still has a large percentage that comes from its own middle class. So what is China doing to address that? They're doing a couple of things. Number one, I'd mentioned earlier these other platforms that are going to be coming online. They're doing those platforms because they see, even though there's large tariffs and they're focusing on BRICS countries, they also understand that they can sell directly from their factories to U.S. consumers without going through all of this importing and stuff like that. So there's a number of platforms that are looking to repeat the success of Temu and Shein. And I was told by one of the top people in the Chinese government that does foreign trade that they're considering this one of the pillars of China's economic reform. So they are all in on getting factories to sell directly to consumers. That's not a good thing. There is a good thing, however. They are subsidizing the factories. And I saw a video with some guru talking about how they're subsidizing factories and this is terrible. No, that means the factories can charge you less because they're getting a bunch of money. So if the factory's being subsidized, they're not going out of business. Small ones that were already risky, those are the ones going out of business, no matter how much they try to hide that from you. I was at a factory once where they told us, you look around, there's hardly any workers. They told us they let all the workers out because they just finished a big order and they're celebrating. First of all, that doesn't happen in China. But I turned I had someone with me for our China trip. And I just quietly said, look around. What do you not see? No chairs at any of the stations. So they don't say, hey, everyone, you got the day off. And then they take the chairs away. They were failing. So If it's a failing factory, it's going to fail anyway, and now it's going to fail faster. Good. Gets the weak ones off the table. Work with the strong ones. Look to see how long they've been in business. Look at their capitalization. That's going to help you a lot in figuring out who the strong ones are and who the weak ones are. How do you manage the import documents, certifications, et cetera, requirements that come from their factories? That's something you need to check up front. Depends on if you're doing OEM or ODM. ODM is something that they are selling already. They've created already, even if you make some small changes. Let's say you're doing the little giraffe and you're making him in yellow instead of blue. That's ODM. They make these things. For that, they should have all of the certifications needed. However, you want to make sure that their certifications are for the US, because there's lots of things they'll sell that they can't sell in the US. That, of course, they're selling to BRICS countries. They have different requirements. So just because they're making something does not mean you can import it into the US. So ask them, can this be made and imported into the US? If they say yes, ask for certifications. If you're doing something new that they haven't made before, that's OEM. ODM, they've made. OEM, you make. Then you're probably going to need certifications. And child safety and stuff like that. Any serious inspection company has a laboratory they can either go to, like they can basically sell SGS services as their own, or they own a laboratory. We go to a laboratory. My group goes to a laboratory in China just so you can see all the tests, understand what's done, how you can save money, what needs to be done, and so on. The one test that I always say be cautious of, or the one certification, is CE certification in Europe, UL certification in the US. That's the thing for electronics. You plug that into the wall, you want to make sure that it's safe. You're not going to blow up the house, make fires, and stuff like that. So you have to pass that certification. That certification is $10,000. $10,000 for the certification. That's crazy. And you've got to pay every year in addition, $1,000 to $2,000. That's why if you have something that's low voltage, you can plug it into the wall with a USB port. And most products these days that plugs into the wall with a USB port, they don't sell that little brick that goes into the wall. They just wrap up a little cord and give it to you. Why? Because if it doesn't go into the wall, they don't have to get that certification. So if you're doing something, ask if it can be low voltage, under 5 volts is the best, that it uses USB, and then do not send the little brick. Besides, if you don't do the brick, you can sell it in Japan, in Thailand, in US, in Germany, in Australia, anywhere, because you don't have to get separate little plugs for your product.
Okay.
Just put the little USB cord, and you'll be happy. So hopefully that answered your question, Jeanette.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Also, maybe we should talk about your China trip. Also, you've been both cross-border summit last 2 times in Chiang Mai. I think definitely having you back this November.
You get the best people together, and the whole vibe, everything you learn. It's one of the smaller, more intimate, and best Amazon events every year. And so anyone who has not gone to that, you've got to go. And then if you're interested in my program, it's your program. We go to the Canton Fair twice a year, and the URL is cantonfairtrip.com. Very easy to remember. Do it over 2 phases. The Canton Fair is huge. It's the largest product exposition in the world. And in order to get all of those products in there, they break it up into 3 phases, each about a week long. Phases 2 and 3 are the ones that impact most of us primarily. Everything from toys to decor to festival products, holiday products, and so on. Our program spans both of those phases. Actually starts a little bit early. We do a day of classroom training, talking about things like this. And then we spend a day at a factory. So you learn what to look for if you visit a factory, and what to discuss when you're talking with suppliers, so that you could understand right away, are they a factory or a trading company? And what are their concerns when they run a factory, so that you become more knowledgeable. Then we hit the fair. And just as you saw there, we do negotiations, shadow negotiations. We teach you what certifications to look for. We teach you the questions to ask, how to identify if something's a trading company or factory, and so on. And I'm there, and other people are there who are experts that you can call at any time for support. And then we have more. We have meetings at night after the fair is over. The days between phase 2 and 3 is jam-packed. We go to the port, as I had mentioned. We meet with an IP attorney who goes over all sorts of ways of protecting your business and your IP in China. I mentioned you go to a certifications, to an inspection company. We go to a packaging factory just so you can see what packaging is all about. We spend a day teaching you, or half a day teaching you, about how to sell to retailers in the US. Absolutely all sorts of things. And then started last October, and we will continue doing it. We do give a break in the middle of all these educational things, and we go get a VIP tour and we see the pandas. So if you've not seen pandas yet, last time there was a 20-week old panda, which was adorable. So all of this gets squeezed in, and you can find all of it at cantonfairtrip.com. And if you have a question, there's links there where you can make appointments with me or just ask Michael. He'll connect you with me.
Yep.
And, love to see you come.
It'd be great.
So,
thank you so much, Steve.
What trade fairs do I plan to attend in 2025? The biggest one for suppliers finding products is the Canton Fair. I may be out in Abiance in Frankfurt this winter. I may be at the Nuremberg Toy Fair. The U.S. Toy Fair is opening up again in March. And I may be a keynote speaker at the International Home and Houseware Show that's now called the Inspire Show. But for sourcing, Canton Fair is way beyond anything. I'll be selling in Atlanta in 4 weeks. And that's the major show for selling to independent and specialty retailers in the US. And I may be back in Australia at the Melbourne and Home Show. We'll see if that happens. Wow. But if I'm not buying products, working with factories, and I'm selling products, oftentimes to retailers, we just onboarded one of our guys to Lowe's. So,
okay, Jessica,
are we looking at other locations? Can I answer that one real fast?
Sure.
Be aware that a lot of locations, they're bringing in their raw material from China. So you've got that cost involved. If they're doing something in plastic or polyester or whatever, they're bringing it in from China. If it's cotton, if it's metal, they might be doing it there. If you are selling on Amazon, that's great because you're not obligated to OTIF. OTIF means on time in full. If you're selling to retailers, then you may be obligated to OTIF, means delivering on time and in full. And some of these other countries, all of these other countries, India, Vietnam, Cambodia, Jakarta, and so on, they have difficulty making deadlines and quantities. You can go to factories in Vietnam and India, and as you walk in, you suddenly realize, wait a second, there's no place for a container to be parked here, so that they're doing small quantities. But if you have a product that can be made in those countries, and Michael knows that I'm looking for a factory in Thailand right now that makes these.
Yep.
So if you have something that's made in those countries natively, great. If not, you're still going to do much better with Chinese prices. So
okay, get more questions.
Okay.
Patrick's got a couple.
Patrick, is it possible to do this as a side hustle, working 9 to 5, weekend enough work for this? And do you recommend one product or multiple products? All right. So there are people, some famous gurus out there, Tim Sanders, Brandon Young. They have incredibly large portfolios. I've got a few of my people that come to China with me and has since then come every time, have very large portfolios of products. But for most people starting off, particularly if you're doing this as a side gig, focus on one product or a small curated amount of products that you can really focus on, get things done. Can you do this while you have a 9 to 5 job? If you have children at home, you're going to have to do it overnights after they go to sleep because it takes a lot of focus. If you're in the US or in the West, that's great because now you're working on China time. But it all depends. I have people I know who have gone to school remotely, particularly during COVID, but they go to classes at night. They work during the day. So yes, you could do anything if you've got the drive to do it. But also sometimes you can squeeze it in at other times. I've worked at Microsoft for 14 years. I had one time for a year that I was in a position that the hiring group hired me, but the group I was working with actually had an application developed that did what I was supposed to do. So I had nothing to do except act as a resource for information. And the rest of the time I sat at my little cube. So I set up my Microsoft computer and my own computer, and I was working on my own business every day. So if you could squeeze it in, great. But if you're new, if you're doing it as a side gig, try to focus on a smaller amount of products that have a lot of growth, products that are less expensive to get into it the first time. If you're doing plastic, you're paying for molds. If you're doing wood, you're not. So if you're doing resin, there's very inexpensive molds. If you're doing something that is fabric, it's inexpensive to get into. Paper products, so inexpensive. So understand how your products are made. You can watch on YouTube a series called How It's Made. And if it's something that requires a high upfront cost and you're doing this as a side gig, realize it's going to cost you more.
Okay.
When you have a failed product and need to switch to a new niche or a new product. Good question.
Yeah.
Adam Smith wrote The Law of Supply and Demand. And the more that there's a supply and the demand is stagnant, that price is going to go down. When your product is being sold by a lot of people, if it gets swamped, it's going to drop in price. It's inevitable. It will happen. Get out before it drops too low. There goes the lights and the power again, but I'm on my phone, so that's
I
okay.
think, yeah.
And more questions, Patrick, talk to Michael, get on my email, reach out to me. We'll get on Zoom and we'll answer all your questions.
Amazing. Yeah. Yeah, Ali
And
said
everyone else
you're definitely the real one, Stephen. We really appreciate.
Oh, I love this business.
Yeah, it's great. All right. Well, yeah, you're on your hot spot in a storm there, so I'll let you
Anything
go.
for you, Michael. Anything.
Thanks. Yeah, so definitely. I mean, I've been at the Canton Fair where Stephen's done his trip, and I've seen his students, and they're really getting full attention and value for the whole time. Like he says, like morning, afternoon, at night. There's workshops. There's on-site visits at the booths. He can go with you to negotiate some of those videos you'll see in today's that we sent you. But it's definitely an intense time. And we got to do more together, Stephen, and probably bring some people from our community with you next time. So,
it would be great.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Thanks so much, Stephen. And please let me know or you can cantonfairtrip.com or let me know, and we can help connect you with Stephen. So, I'll pop into the networking session. There's table modes in the software if people want to chat a little bit. I know it's been a long session, but if people want to say hi, I'll be there. I'll let Stephen go unless he wants to test that out. But I
am.
Yeah, I think you gotta go. You gotta go.
Figure out what's happening with our electricity here. So
yeah. Take care, Stephen. All right, and
all right.
Thanks, everybody. The future of e-commerce is waiting. LoadPipe is back. It's a protocol. We are making the new way to do e-commerce with blockchain technology. This is very early stage, and we have Hamza as our first marketplace in this new ecosystem. It's very epic. If you want to participate, we are on an alpha stage in Q1 2024, where you can be a buyer or a vendor, application only. Check it out at hamza.biz for the marketplace or the overview of this protocol, and subscribe for updates at loadpipe.com. See you there. Thank you, Steven Selikoff, for sharing. Again, the URL for this show notes and links and other stuff at globalfromasia.com/multiple. And actually, we're blessed with that in Christmas. I think a lot of us make money on Q4 in the e-commerce or retail game because that's when everybody's buying gifts and last minute shoppers. So that's when we also get that higher multiple, especially some of our gift category brands like Excalibur Brothers, we're increasing the price steadily, almost trying to purposely slow down sales because you want to stay in stock. So, I hope you all had a good Q4. We were pretty blessed and fortunate, but of course it's not easy. It's not just an automatic. You got to work hard. You got to be persistent. But thanks so much for watching. That was a longer one. I hope you enjoy. We'll also link up to a lot of those things in the show notes. Again, you can check it out at globalfromasia.com/multiple.
To get more info about running an international business, please visit our website at www.globalfromasia.com. That's www.globalfromasia.com. Also, be sure to subscribe to our iTunes feed. Thanks for tuning in.